We've gone live from the same place?
No, we went
with The Handmaid's Tale.
And we also went live from my kitchen table about something.
Oh, we did.
Doing Monday mornings.
We did a GDD. Oh, hey, y'all.
Hey, everybody. Welcome.
Hey. We just in the middle of our chats in the same space.
In the same place. This is still a these times miracle. So we're very, very excited. For everybody who is joining us today, if you saw the advertised name, we are going to be talking with Sharyl Loeung, who is one of our dear friends. I've known her for years. She and Aaron are newer friends, but not, any less important. And one of the greatest things that Sharyl's currently doing at her job is at a university in Texas, working with a team of students, talking about what COVID looks like on college campuses. So we're going to hear from Sharyl. We're going to hear from a couple of the students. We know that from our international viewers, you guys have been asking us a lot about what COVID looks like at universities here, because it looks a lot different than universities where you are. Mm-hmm. And in America, state by state means that it looks different in every single state. So here on the channel, we're going to be, you'll be seeing soon, I'm just pulling up some of our empathy exercises, guys. You'll be seeing soon a special edition talking to a public school teacher from the state of Texas about what teaching high school right now is like in COVID. That's going to be coming up, I believe, this Sunday, if not next Sunday. So this Sunday. So keep an eye out for that. And she'll be talking about that. But then once we get into university, it's a completely different ballgame. So we're really grateful to Sharyl and her students today, who we'll meet in a little bit. But before we do that, as always, it's time for empathy exercises.
It's time. I know I feel like we should have a fancy transition there, but we don't.
We don't. We'll ask after Eleanor completes the 17-page to-do list of requests that we've had from her. We'll request empathy exercises transition.
A transition to
empathy exercises.
Da, da, da.
Okay.
Because the ones that we make up on the flyer and it's cool is what Eleanor could do. Yeah, you're up first.
Yeah.
Numero uno.
Numero uno. So if anyone is familiar with the international church juggernaut Hillsong, they've been around for a minute. They were really big. They're starting in Australia with a guy named Brian Houston. And they're now, there's campuses everywhere. You may know that word because Justin Bieber attends the Los Angeles campus with his wife, Baldwin. One of the Baldwin, anyway.
Is it a Baldwin?
It's a Baldwin, yeah, because Chris Pratt is married to a Schwarzenegger. Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah? Okay.
Well, I don't know.
Anyway, so LA Hillsong is really big and has a lot of famous folks there. Selena Gomez showed up when she and Biebs were dating. But all of this to say is it's a non-denominational, very production heavy. If you don't aren't familiar with Hillsong, they've been producing CDs for ever. Haley Baldwin, Jay coming in with the save. Thank you, Jay, as always. So Hillsong has been plagued with leadership problems forever. And recently the pastor of their New York campus was asked to leave. His name's Carl Lentz, and he was asked to leave because he was cheating on his wife, and that's against their pastoral code. Now we find out the Australian police have essentially brought charges against Brian Houston for knowing about sexual assault that his father committed and not reporting it to the police. This is, we don't think necessarily controversial from a child protection standpoint or the protection of the survivors, but we understand where sometimes for people it's why is it Brian's responsibility? Why is Brian getting criminal charges? His father is dead. Is this a thing? All of that kind of stuff. It's a messy situation, but at the heart of it are people that Brian's father allegedly abused. And now I'm sure members of Hillsong congregation who have survived themselves, who now have to deal with the fact that their pastor's family has been a part of this. So in terms of empathy exercises, we just want to keep everybody remembering that no matter where in the world you are, this is messy. And this kind of thing is hard. And we can always this isn't a time to laugh at Hillsong. This isn't a time to mock Hillsong or to kind of joke about its hubris, as I have seen on a lot of Christian Twitter in the last couple of weeks. This is a time to realize what this probably means for a lot of people in the congregation and in the Houston's life. So now we go on to we are going to stay in Australia.
Ironically enough, we didn't plan this.
And head to the topic of reparations.
That's right. So it was announced this week that the government of Australia is going to establish a $280 million fund, reparation fund for the stolen generation. And we've been talking on this channel a lot about the forced assimilation and forced removal of Indigenous children from their families and cultures and communities into white families and cultures and communities, or is it Indian residential schools, boarding schools, First Nations children in Canada, Native Americans here, Aboriginal children in Australia, which is what they're referencing. So that is the stolen generation of which they speak. And the empathy exercise is, if you didn't know the Australian government sanctions the stealing of Aboriginal children, surprise! This is the empathy exercise for you. So in a few days, once our beloved Eleanor gets the show notes up, we will make sure and link to the article letting you know a little bit more about what is with the reparations fund and how they will be restituting some of that harm caused monetarily.
Yeah, and the Canadian government has announced on September 30th a Truth and Reconciliation Day, a national holiday. We'll be kind of keeping an eye on that. We found out about it from Bank of America, who let me know that the Canadian banks will be closed that day. So we don't know a whole lot of details. Jay may or may not either. So we'll kind of keep our eye on that as our resident Canadian correspondent. So we'll
totally bring her in as our Canadian correspondent.
We'll call you, Jay, our Ottawa correspondent. So the next thing up is the constant potential evolution of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. For anyone who wasn't part of the drama around the Golden Globes, you may or may not know that Jay affirms that they have a day off, and that's all we know. That may be all that ever happens.
That anyone ever
Who
knows.
knows how much lip service this is? We'll all be kind of keeping tabs on that.
Yeah.
But HFPA has approved reformed bylaws to try to make them an actually potentially inclusive organization.
Yeah.
Because right now it's all white folks judging a industry that is far from that.
Mm. Yeah, and this follows on from the controversy from this year's Golden Globes and the lack of folks of different color.
And Emily in Paris winning anything.
Oh, that was terrible. I don't want to talk about it because it's nominated for Emmys as well. And NBC's decision following from that said controversy to not air the Golden Globes in 2022. So they HFPA came out saying they would, work to change and make a promise to actually change, because we've heard this before from the Golden Globes and the Oscars. So we will wait and see. But it's an interesting potential for institutional change and a move towards real inclusivity. So we'll keep a weather eye on that.
Okay. Also happening, something that we talk a lot about. Obviously, we've already talked about sexual violence on this channel. Today, we talk about it a lot. News out of India that a 9-year-old girl in Delhi who was found dead with some obvious evidence of sexual assault. She was low caste, which for anybody not familiar with India, the lower down the caste you get, the more disposable you are treated by the state and by many of the fellow citizens. And so this is the family accuses men of raping this girl and then cremating her to hide the evidence. And this is not uncommon attitudes. It's maybe an uncommon practice. It may be a very egregious practice. It's not an uncommon attitude. And we need to constantly remember that the fight for not only lower caste rights, but rights for non-male presenting people in India is ongoing perpetually, and something we always need to be advocating for, because it's rough stuff over there sometimes for folks. Roof stoof.
It's a big deal. And we talk about, we talk about sexual assault and gender identity and all those things all the time on this channel. So anytime we see something, especially that highlights the performance of gender, the treatment of gender, the assault and abuse that people of different gender and sex identities experience around the world, we're always going to shout it out in the empathy exercises, because we know Americans are super good at international news watching.
We're not given the opportunity to, so we try to be your opportunity people.
We should have like an international news alert too. We're gonna get so many alerts.
Many alerts. There's gonna be graphics. It's gonna be great. We have a Colonizers World Tour video coming up in which countries are highlighted like ping pong balls. We're super excited. Eleanor's amazing.
She's the best.
So we got another really quick kind of shout out. If you've heard us talk about body shape diversity and health on this channel, then you've heard us make funny noises over the body mass index. It's not great. It's not scientific. And if you'd love to have some more information about that, my favorite health podcast called Maintenance Phase did an entire deep dive into the history, which is incredibly racist, history of the body mass index. It's done by Aubrey Gordon, who you may know as your fat friend. That's her handle on all social media. She's a great new book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. But the deep dive into the BMI is worth absolutely everybody's time. Cannot endorse it enough. As for anyone joining us for the first time, all the links to our empathy exercises will be below, and you'll be able to click on them post haste. Final empathy exercise before we bring our guests on is our transition empathy exercise, which is the data coming out that the New York Times has reported this week that there are basically no one goes to kindergarten anymore. Not that dire, but it kind of feels like it.
The COVID of it all.
Because of COVID, there is we're going to just actually show this map really quick. Share screen,
Tips.
whatever. I don't care.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, StreamYard. So if you look at that map, anywhere that's yellow is somewhere there that the kindergartens in that area lost 20% or more of their kindergarten students. 20% or more. Now, and if for anybody who can't see, it's really small. The data, the states that are blank, the data was not available. It's not necessarily that they're not, Kentucky is perfect. So we know that kindergarten is really essential to early childhood education. And this is very, very troubling. There's a lot of things with COVID that are very, very troubling, and we've got some experts here to talk to us about it. I am now going to introduce and welcome our friend Sharyl to the stream. Sharyl, if you would really briefly introduce yourself and then explain a little bit about the grant.
Sure. My name is Sharyl Loeung, and I will say that I am nowhere near a kindergarten teacher, nor will I ever be any good at that. But I do have children around that age, so I have so many thoughts on that, and that's not why I'm here. So it's really hard not to talk about it. However, I am passionate about education, and so one of the things that I can say is that as an educator, there's concerns about education gaps all the way through. And so I'm actually on a college campus, and one of the things that I've been working on this last 2 months specifically is how do we get students who are hesitant to consider being vaccinated. And so I applied for a grant from the Interfaith Youth Corps and was able to secure that grant. And it's actually called a Faith in Vaccines grant. And so it is based on the idea that after they did a ton of research, that faith communities have a lot to do with people's reactions to basically being for or against getting vaccinated. And so what they found in their research, and IFYC does a ton of research, and they're actually based on higher education, everything that they do, which is really great for me and the research that I get to benefit from.
Yeah. So
26% of Americans said that they would be more likely to get a vaccine if a faith-based programming was involved. That's just straight Americans who are hesitant. So we're not talking about those who are completely closed off, but hesitant.
Hesitant, okay.
So then if you look at those who are hesitant, who attend church periodically, just a few times a year, that number goes up to 44%.
Wow.
Okay.
Yes. And that's just religiously affiliated. So with Interfaith Youth Corps, obviously they're looking at all kinds of faith traditions, not just what some of us automatically think of as like a white Protestant Christian or Catholic affiliation, but any affiliation. And so IFYC applied to get a grant from the Arthur Vine Davis Foundation, and they were able to get that grant. And what they did was they say, we have what we call Better Together cohorts, which are groups of student interfaith groups all across the country in colleges who are already trained to do civic work in their communities. And they're made up of the types of people who are most hesitant. So it makes a lot of sense to then give them grants to go and work in the communities where they're already located. And so since their demographics match the hesitant people and they already are embedded in the community, let's quit giving money or resources to people who don't know these communities, and let's give it to college students who are passionate, they're savvy, and they just need some training on how to do community work. And so we got one of those grants, and we've been working since June 1, just doing all kinds of projects. So that's the kind of short end of what that is.
Amazing. So let me say to anyone who has joined us in the chat, please go ahead. There's some of Sharyl's team has made sure to be here to be answering the questions as well. If you've got questions about anything we're talking about today, or anything that Sharyl says, or the students who are going to join us on camera, go ahead and be vocal. They've got all the data and they want to share it for sure. So Sharyl, what has been like some of the things that have happened to raise awareness or do things like that? Like what kind of activities are happening?
Yeah, so, things happened very quickly in that I was awarded the grant on May 25th, and I had to have a team together by June 1st.
Okay, great,
and
cool.
So, you
How grants
quickly,
work?
the first thing was to look at the Better Together group that we do have here and the interfaith students and those leadership. And then you start shoulder tapping students I've had in class and asking their friends. And so I really didn't know all the students that I even picked.
Okay.
I wasn't 100% sure what that camaraderie might be, but it's turned out to be an incredible cohort of 18 students who, part of it is that they can work together as a group, but they can also split off and do side projects. But they've done a phenomenal job of working both as a unit and in these little mini projects. And so one of the, I think, most meaningful things that we've been able to see them do is record podcasts and really dive into their stories of their own experiences. Most people through COVID have not had a chance to stop and reflect on what is meant to them, what their family experience was, what did it mean to get vaccinated. And so being able to share both the difficulty of living in isolation or not being able to go to school or having lost a family member, all the possible things that people have gone through, to what was it like when you first heard there was a vaccine, and realizing that there are a lot of people who, when they first heard there was a vaccine, didn't say, oh, I'm going to go out tomorrow and get it. That so many people who have been vaccinated now went through a period of, I don't know about this. I don't trust this. I have religious hangups. I have scientific hangups. It's not FDA approved, or, my family really doesn't trust the government, and for really good reasons. I mean, all kinds of things. And so just to tell those narratives so that other people could hear that the people who are trying to get them to get vaccinated now didn't just wake up one morning and willy-nilly go and get first in line. And so that's been really effective, is the story sharing.
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that's not getting talked about. We have pretended that the nation especially is divided in between people who were the first in line and people who are active deniers.
Yeah.
And we haven't given space to those middle stories at all. Wow. Yeah, I'm going to sit with that for a little bit for sure, especially with college students who are both their own people and members of a family, deeper than like those of us who are adults who are like, it's like, none of us is a proper adult. I haven't ever been a proper adult, but my parents have a little bit less ties to me than they did when I was in college.
Sure. And
go ahead, Erin.
I just think the importance of giving people the space to talk about it is so incredibly valuable, because we're so focused on getting out of it, whatever that means, going back to normal. And we've ranted for 18 months about going back to normal as a phrase on this channel. But like, the importance of just allowing people time to process it, because it's always been like going from one trauma to the next and then trying to get to this place where we can be done, and what that must feel like for anybody of any age group, but particularly college students.
And you have to remember, with college students, they weren't first in line unless they had some reason to be first in line. And so for so many of them, they had to make a decision to be vaccinated during the summer, most likely, while they were in their parents' homes.
Okay.
And so their first opportunity was very likely at the very end of the semester or at home.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to, offer more grace than maybe the average person wants to, and that there are many students who aren't just not wanting to get vaccinated, but need a chance to get back on campus and have a space to breathe and to make some decisions on their own, because they really are not able, without some pretty rebellious acts, to get away and make those decisions until they get home. Because in Texas, it was available to everyone very quickly, but that's not true in a lot of states. So
yeah, it was much more controlled here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And then it's still very controlled in most places around the world. And we need to also acknowledge that American colleges have a huge international population, and the one that you work at is no different. And so someone's availability, if they live in, I was actually just talking to a friend of mine who lives in rural Uganda, and there was like, at one point, there were 15 vaccinations in the whole country, like 15 shots. And that's not uncommon in a lot of the more under-resourced countries on the planet.
Yeah. And so I will get to our guests in a minute, but we've got one who's a freshman and one's a senior. And there's a huge, huge difference in terms of, family dynamics when you're 18 and just got to school, or you're 22 and you drive yourself back from, the semester. So
yeah.
So
speaking of guests, we'd love to welcome them and hear their perspective. Do you have a vision for who should we bring both of them on at once? What's you know them best, and you know what stories we're going to tell.
Oh, I didn't know what our technology would allow us to do.
Oh, we can bring both on at once if they're prepared for that. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what they're prepared for, but I would love to bring both on at once and kind of contrast that story, if that's possible.
That's my pleasure.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I would love for you guys to introduce yourselves really briefly so everybody can get to know you. Mari, would you start?
Of course. I'm Mari Sanchez. I'm a rising sophomore this year. So my first college year was a COVID year. Very interesting. But I plan to study finance for pre-law. That's kind of the direction I'm headed. But yeah, I'm very, very excited to be here today. Very excited to be an ambassador for the Faith and Vaccine. It's like Sharyl had mentioned about the podcast. That was something, and I really loved how you guys said that and just emphasized storytelling is so important right now. And so thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share our stories.
Oh my God, it's our privilege.
We're delighted to have you guys.
For sure. Nate, what about you?
Well, hello, I'm Nate Rowan. I will be a senior next year. And I echo everything that Mari said about how much I've enjoyed in the past being able to talk about my story related to COVID, and looking forward to doing it today.
Okay, great. Well, then let's jump right into it. Will you guys talk us through before we even get to the vaccine? Can you talk us through a little bit about what COVID was like for you over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. It was super interesting. So I honestly didn't have anything to compare it to, obviously, but that I think was something that played to my favor in a way, because I still had a very, very wonderful experience. I met some people that were just amazing, and we were all going through that same thing. And I think we had all gone in with a mindset that relationships are important during this time. And I always think that, like I've said that multiple times, is we were made for connection. And I just think that was something that was so highlighted during the pandemic. So going into college, we were still looking for friendships, but in a safe way. And I thought that was facilitated pretty well. I had hybrid classes. Some I did get to go in person. Some were completely online, just asynchronous, doing that through. And I've always been somebody that learns better in the classroom, but my professors were very helpful and reached out quite a bit to try to make that process smooth. But I said this to Sharyl, I am like the queen of quarantine. It was ridiculous. I was like, what is going on? But obviously I was happy to do it to keep, my peers around me safe. But it was crazy. It was like I think a month in, boom, I'm quarantined. I was like, wait a minute, this is real. But it was with some of my friends, and so we kind of all were FaceTiming, and even that just kind of showed it's you try to continue these friendships and relationships when you're isolated, and those are what are important and kind of keep us going through. But a lot of the events were down to 10 people. And so that was something that was different. And I bet Nate could speak more on that, because I've talked to upperclassmen and they're like, you guys did not get anything close to what we did. And I was like, oh, thank you. But I was like, that's good to know. I still had a great time though. But yeah, so I'm very excited to see that going into this year, just because everything was so kind of whittled down to smaller groups, more outside activities, more online, things like that. And so it was enjoyable. I loved my first year. I really did. But I'm also very excited to see a little bit more of the college freshman experience, I guess.
Because your university has made the decision to open up completely in the fall, right? So like all activities are back, everything. Okay.
Yep, 100% capacity. Right now, masks are not required at the moment, but everything is back to normal, opening up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I just thinking back to my college experience, if I had a lot of ideas of what my senior year would look like, Nate, and I'm sure you did too. And so your experience was probably a little bit different than Mari's.
Yeah, it was quite the challenge, and I'm glad that you had such a good experience, Mari. Because I feel like my sister was a freshman at a different school, and she had a pretty she had a pretty tough time forming those connections. So I'm glad that you had such a good experience. So last year was my junior year at school, and it ended up being actually quite the challenge. Because I say me and Mari sound similar in how much that we value relationships with others. A lot of my close friends were a lot more, I guess, comfortable getting together in person and doing a lot of, I guess, less COVID safe activities than I was. And so it could be a big challenge to find people to both kind of maintain relationships with, while also being COVID safe, which created a fair amount of loneliness, a fair amount of, I guess, frustration with just, I want to be going out and doing this thing with my friends, but should I? Will it be endangering others if I go and do this? That's a lot to carry around. And so, yeah, it could be certainly challenging at times, but I think by as the year wore on, you kind of, I guess, figure out and get a better idea of who the people are that are going to take care of you and that you'll take care of them. And so the spring semester was much better in that regard, kind of figuring out, all right, here's your type people. I'm really looking forward to the senior year. Kind of establish that. Still anxious for the senior year, especially with all the new stuff happening in the last couple of weeks. But yes, looking much more optimistic than I have been in the past.
Fair. Yeah. I mean, for anyone who is listening to this on the podcast, and you're listening to it much later, reminder that our conversation is happening on August the 10th. So the entire country is trying to figure out what Delta is right now. And as you're listening to this, we may have figured it out. God hope we have figured it out. But we certainly have not, as we are all speaking right now. Especially not with what to do with a lot of school situations, as we've been alluding to earlier. Do you have I have 7 questions. Do you want to jump in here?
I've got 7 comments, so y'all just figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a question, but I just wanted to comment on what you said about forming relationships. And so much about college is that process of figuring out who your group of people are and what kind of people you gravitate towards and what relationships are successful and or change. And I think, we all have moments in our life where something happens that forces us to change, the situation or our relationships. And you're talking about that, Nate, but when you said that, I was like, what a situation, to cope for COVID to for me, it was a missed birthday. And I was like, oh, well, maybe these aren't my people. but to have COVID kind of shock your relationship system and the people that you have around you and force that kind of change, I can imagine was very difficult. But I just wanted to say, like, that's a thing that happens in college, but it doesn't usually happen during a global pandemic. So
yeah, there were definitely times where I would, like, in college just be like, oh, well, I guess I'm not friends with that person anymore. That's really weird. But it isn't because that person is making a decision that I, like, don't agree with health-wise. Like, it was a bit of a different vibe. Okay, here we go. Well, Sharyl, you said you had questions. I want to let you ask a few too.
Well, some comments. I mean, I think one of the things that I would hope from this show that people get is just to sort of spread out the stereotypes about college students, that they're all out partying, and that so many college students are to blame for so many things, that really that there's, I mean, sure, that's happening, but that there are students who are like Nate. And even Mari as a freshman, yes, she was the quarantine queen. However, when you live in a dorm room, it's very hard not to get contact traced. I mean, you're just gonna, and you were, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. It's gonna happen. So you can't be on a college campus that is chosen to be face-to-face and that not happen to you. But, and Nate was also quarantined a lot. So, and he was very diligent and made a lot of efforts. But if your roommates aren't making those decisions they need to be making, you're stuck too. So, but what I was really getting at is that there are plenty of students who were trying everything they could, that were making every decision based on the community, that were trying to think about maybe their grandparents or a sibling or a coworker or their professors. And so just to kind of break up that stereotype that they're all out on the beach or whatever, getting COVID and infecting the world.
Yeah, and I think like it's important for all of us to remember that there's a lot of blame going around about certain populations. We see all of the maps that are coming out. Like if somebody watches this television channel, they're more likely to do this. If they live in this state, they're more likely to do this. We need to remember that statisticians, and I say this with one on the call with us, Nate is a statistician, but statisticians' job is to do patterns. Like that's literally their job. And so we need to remember that humans are not in patterns when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about something as emotional and traumatic, both personally and communally as COVID is. So, okay, well, then I will get really, speaking of statistician, one of my first questions for Nate and Mari, which I have you guys on mute just for tech stuff. So as you speak, just unmute yourself and mute yourself back. StreamYard is sometimes a little bit strange with the echoing. But I'd love to know, as you've gotten into this grant work now, what has been your favorite part of this job, as it were? And either one of you can go first.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take it. I honestly love, and this is kind of weird, but the conversations that come up with people that I have never talked about, like a topic like this before. And I just have these conversations with people I have been close with for a long time. And to see how we both kind of think through these things on a topic that is just so divisive in certain places, it was really interesting. It was really cool. And I really got closer, I feel like, with people around me because we were able to mention or talk about a topic like this, and like the vaccine, but also how to view, because I've had several friends who haven't been as careful as I have been. And it does cause a little bit, it's kind of like, okay, well, we got to think about the people around us and the families of those around us as well. And so I've really enjoyed kind of working through that and not just being like, oh, okay, I don't like what they're doing, but also create a conversation, a meaningful one, that hopes to help ease their hesitations when it comes to the vaccine as well. But also to kind of share my point of view. And it's been really cool to be able to do that, especially with people that are from my hometown, but also that go to the university that I'm at. I've just started conversations with them that I didn't think I ever would. And I feel like it's brought us closer. And I really like that aspect of it. And sometimes it gets a little, you're kind of like, oh, maybe I'm touching a nerve here, but I don't know. And that helps me as well, kind of grow in how do I really get across in the way that I want to without creating any sort of, I guess, ill will with it too. So that has been wonderful to do.
I love that. Yeah, there's an art to having difficult conversations, and I love that you guys are learning it at with such hands-on examples right now.
And it takes a lot of practice.
Lots of practice.
A lot of practice. Yeah.
For sure. I'm still learning, but I love
Yeah,
it. I love
we are
the
too.
process.
Yep.
Yeah, I found that something that someone Mari, when you have to kind of figure out, like, it's easy to just like yell at a person in the abstract and be like, oh my gosh, like, you're such a fool for being so reckless for not getting the vaccine, but kind of talking to them and so you remember, oh yeah, like they might have a completely different family background from me, or the people that surround them might be doing something completely different. That's what I have found as well to be the biggest thing I've learned. I've been working on a survey for our campus community, kind of trying to figure out the reasons for vaccine hesitancy. And that's been the big thing for me as well as in designing the survey, kind of remembering that, oh yeah, like there are going to be all kinds of different reasons, all kinds of different experiences that I have not had that might be influencing somebody's hesitancy to get or to not get the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, that's great. Because I mean, that was actually going to be my next question. And some of this is you guys are so early in the research, I know. And so I've already informed Sharyl. I didn't even invite her. I just informed Sharyl that when you guys have your findings, somebody will be coming back and telling us about them. Because I know it's really new. But I keep thinking back to the stats that Sharyl read at the beginning, where so people who are in faith communities are so much more likely to engage with this this vaccine conversation if somebody in their faith is doing that. Do any of you have an idea as to why that is, why that particular marriage of faith and science is happening?
I don't know entirely why, but I'm Catholic, and that has just been a big part of how I viewed the vaccine. A lot of it is, it's my expression for my neighbor, my love of them, and that is how I've really viewed it. A lot. My mom is immunocompromised. She has 2 autoimmune diseases, and that has played a huge role in how I've handled the pandemic itself, how I've really tried to make decisions that have protected her. And I think about I haven't gotten COVID, but if I were to get it, I'd be okay in a couple days. And that is not true for a lot of people. And that's something that I try to keep in mind. I run the Instagram for our cohort, and I shared it with a couple of my classmates in the same learning cohort that I'm in as well for our core classes. And there was somebody that came back and said, I don't think it is okay to relate the vaccine with the love of neighbor. And I loved the feedback. I really did, because he said, I think that will deter you from some of your audience that you're trying to reach. And so I appreciated that part of it, but I also was thinking, I don't know if his faith, I'm not entirely sure what he identifies as, but my faith is how I've connected those two. This is my way of showing that I care about your family. I care about your grandmother, your grandpa, your mother, dad, that type of thing. That's how I've kind of seen it. And so for them to kind of say, I don't think those should correlate at all. That was really interesting to me. So I don't know if that is him not, I guess, being as involved in faith as I am, or if that was something that is just differing between us. But that I can speak on my personal, that's why I've really seen both of them work together in that way, is kind of how I've viewed it a little bit. So I thought that was interesting, that was like my thing. And then he was like, no, I don't think so. So it was interesting for sure. Interesting.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, as a person of faith myself, like that was a big part of it, was the understanding that, as that we're communal creatures and that the decisions I make with my body affect other people, whether I want them to or not. Like I have control over my body, but I can't pretend that I live in isolation. And the disease itself does not make any judgments about who it attacks. So, I kind of need to do my little bit apart. We have a great question before we move on to anything else that got here from Courtney, who asks, Nate, do you think your work in interfaith with Better Together has prepared you for your work in vaccine outreach? How similar or different are they? What a great question, Courtney. Thank you so much.
That is a great question, Courtney. And Courtney is actually one of the Better Together co-leaders with me.
Oh, delightful.
I know, how wonderful. So I think that somebody talked about this earlier, but Better Together is kind of an interfaith group on our campus where we basically come together and talk about both shared values and also differences between our different faiths and non-faiths. For example, I'm agnostic, and so Better Together is made up of people of all faiths, non-faiths. Anyways, has work in interfaith Better Together prepared you for work in vaccine outreach? Yes, I would say so, because basically I think the biggest takeaway I've had from Better Together is empathy, but not just empathy for people that are similar to me, but empathy for people who might come from backgrounds that are wildly different from me. Thinking about people's stories that had I not been in Better Together and been placed in that space, it would have never even occurred to me that a person with that story would exist. But then you hear it first person, it's like, oh yes, like of course there are people with different backgrounds from me. I'm just not thinking about it. And so then similarly with the vaccine outreach, I'm a very science brain person. And I'm just like for me, it's like it's just such a no-brainer to get the vaccine. Like, of course, how would you not be doing it? But then you remember, for example, even people very close to me, like my grandparents get their news from completely different sources than I do. When they're inundated with that information, 24/7, it's all they're seeing. Well, of course, they're not going to want to get want to get the vaccine if all that they're seeing is how dangerous it is. Mm-hmm. So I guess just keeping in mind that there are those wildly different backgrounds, and having that, I guess, taking kind of an empathetic approach to vaccine outreach has been a big useful skill for me.
Totally fair. It's interesting when you talk about empathy. For anybody who hasn't met us before, that's our shtick. That's
what we do.
Literally what we do. So we're empathy educators. It's how we identify. And our position is that empathy is an intellectual posture. It's not an emotional reaction you have to somebody. It's a decision that you constantly make is how you move through the world is with an empathetic worldview. And what Nate just articulated is our business plan. So thanks so much for that, Nate. Did that work for us?
Yeah.
So it's such a great point though, because I think especially in a situation like COVID, which has often been fear-driven for all of us on some level, even if that's not the predominant emotion you cater in, I think all of us would be lying if we said at some point in time we weren't scared over the last 18 months. And so when you make decisions out of fear and you make decisions about other people out of fear, it's a lot harder to hold that empathy. It's a lot harder. It's a real practice to be able to say okay, well, your fear is based in something I don't understand, or something I haven't experienced it, but let's try to have those kind of conversations together. That was a great answer. Thanks for that question too, Courtney. That was a great question.
I know.
Something just to add, but with Nate wandered in his first week of his freshman year, and guys, particularly white guys, don't walk into an interfaith group by themselves as freshmen. It's just not how that works, and never left. But one of the things that has been really interesting to watch with Nate and his growth, and I know that he doesn't mind me saying this, although he might start blushing, I don't know, but
he can turn his camera off if he gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. We'll have words later. But is that he has had to work harder than everyone else to earn trust, and he knows that because he presents like a certain stereotype, at our university, and that is part of the work that he has to do, even though he's technically a religious minority on our campus. And so he's like, no, really agnostic, but
that's okay. You're not alone on this call.
So one of the things that has been really kind of beautiful to watch is that that I didn't get to talk about earlier when we talked about our COVID story, and everyone's COVID story, is that we were seeing this on a college campus where for college students and everyone, but in particular college students, is that we were coming out of, the George Floyd summer and all of the movements that were trying to occur and take place and being kind of bottled up because nobody can go out, nobody can do anything. And then this last spring with all of the API hate. And so it's been really cool to watch people like Nate actually get called in and say, you're somebody that we trust and respect and can lead. And that's because of that long-term, slow, intellectual view of empathy. So just for your listeners, it can be done. It's just a long commitment.
It's work. Like, that's the thing we always say. Like, you don't get to a point where you're done working on your empathy. And like, we talk about a lot of things in the work that we do, but we're really honest when we aren't empathetic about things, and we catch ourselves and we try and talk about it as part of our practice to say, like, there's things that you're going to slip by you and you're not going to realize you have an internalized position about that. We were covering a documentary for our Colonizers World Tour that was about trans sex workers in Puerto Rico. All fun and games here on Abbey Research. And I was presented with my own internalized perceptions of sex workers watching this documentary, and I was like, why am I having these thoughts? What? Oh, okay. And like, by talking about it and creating a space where we can have these conversations, that's where we hope to build that empathy, because it has to be okay for you to say, I've changed my mind, or I was wrong about this, or after listening to these people, I feel differently about this. And we don't have a lot of space for that in our society, even before the COVID.
Yeah. And I think, Sharyl, I'm glad you brought in the summer of 2020 into this, because I think a lot of us forget that it happened because 2020 doesn't feel real. Like, when I say last year, I mean 2019.
Yeah.
Most of the time. And B, I think we all forget what that felt like in the midst of it. Like, I remember watching some of the protests last summer, now that you're talking about it. And like, one of my questions was, is everyone masked? Like, I wasn't as worried about the justice as I was about the masks. And that's a tension that I had to learn to hold as well. And kind of what that all looks like. But that's a rabbit trail for another time. But thanks for bringing that in. I'm mindful, speaking of time, that you guys have been very generous with yours. And so I want to wrap it up here. As we kind of hold space for you and hold these stories for you while you guys are gathering the data and you're getting ready to go back to campus full time. Classes are going to start soon, I'm assuming, within the next couple of weeks. Those of us who are not in day-to-day college life, what do you want us to know about what life is like on a college campus right now? Easy questions here at Abbey Research. All we do are softballs.
Softballs, lob and softballs.
Lob and softballs. So what would you like us to hold as a truth for you?
I don't know if you'd like to go first, Nate, but if not.
Nate would very much like you to go first, Mari. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That is a great question, because it's like, you don't think about all the people that haven't been having the same experience. Because you are surrounded by those that have kind of gone through it, just with my friends and everything. But there are so many that have their own challenges with their own environments that they're in, whether it be the workplace, whether it be a higher education. But I think I would just want people to understand that we're here for each other. And I think our society is always, so get over it and do it yourself. That type of mentality. I just feel like we have that. And I think we're moving towards a more like, no, you have people there for you for a reason. The people around you, they want to be here for you just as much as you want to be there for them. And I think that's something that I would 100% want people to take away, because it's a difficult journey and it's a difficult thing to kind of handle yourself. And so to know that there are people that are there for you in a college setting, when classes are online and you can't have that face-to-face with professors all the time, you have your classmates and you have those people that, even older people, like the ones that like Nate, and because we are different. Not that you're
Wait,
older.
Hold on. Who's old on this call? So yeah.
Not that you're older, just that we're in different.
Sorry, it's
we're in
okay.
different
You're turning
years.
bright red. It's totally fine. We are all in our late 30s. It's fine. Yep, we get it.
No, I promise. I'm so sorry. I did not mean that.
No, girl, we forgive you. It's not a thing. Just we were having fun.
I feel old all the
My
time.
bones are old. Trust me, my back lets me know that I'm old every day. So don't worry about it.
I feel it too. I feel it too. But
I think
yeah,
that's great. Yeah, I think that's great that we all need to remember that there's even, and like I'll kind of call out Sharyl and I, we talk nearly every day, if not at least a couple times a week. And both of us have really different lives. And I can tell both in our voice messages back and forth to each other when we forget that the other person doesn't know this thing that happens every day in our lives. Like, and we're really good friends and talk all the time. So obviously that's a challenge for everybody, even when you're not in immediate physical relationship. I think there's a proximity thing here, where even if you're talking to somebody all the time, it's different to live life with them. And we got to remember that we're not living life with a lot of folks right now. I think that's a great point. Thanks, Mari.
For me, I guess probably just keep in mind that like the experience is not a monolith for everyone. It's like if you're wondering like what the experience is like of your resident college student, ask, because it's probably completely different from when me and Mari are at the same school, and our experience is completely different, which is completely different from, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. It's completely different from my friends at Arizona State experience. It's completely different from the experience of my friends that go to other schools. So I guess, yeah, the experience is not a monolith. And if you're wondering, just ask, and they'll probably be happy to talk to you all about what it was like, because college students love talking about themselves. I love talking about myself.
A spoiler alert, humans love talking about themselves. Speaking of that question asking, we have this comment from our friend Jay, who is in Ottawa. So she says, no question, but thank you for sharing your experiences. For those of us not in school and not in the US even, it's very different from what I've heard from our students at work. So I appreciate this point of view. So thank you not only to Mari and Nate, but to all the students who are on this call and who have been doing this work and putting this all in. Thank you so, so much.
And I think the point that you made, Nate, again, have you read our bio? You know Abby Research, because we talk about the importance of curiosity all the time. And I think that's something that, especially when we get siloed into positions or opinions or news networks or whatever, it's hard to be curious about people outside of those silos. And that curiosity is a huge part of empathy and asking about other humans and trying to hear their stories and listen to their experiences and give them the space to tell you about who they are is a really great posture to have regardless of a pandemic, but certainly now. So we can all extend that empathy to all the young folks in some form of education, or older folks everywhere.
Absolutely. Well, Nate and Mari, we're going to say goodbye to you. And thank you so much, Sharyl. We've got just a wrap-up question for you. But Nate and Mari, thanks again so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
All right, Sharyl. You got some good kids there.
I mean, I stress so much because I have 18 and I could not pick. I mean, they're just, yeah.
Yeah, everybody, we kept going back and forth in chat, and I could tell that she was essentially asking, can I have all 18 on camera? And I was just like, Nate, we can do several of these. Yeah. But StreamYard only lets 10. So like, let's kind of, and then more than 2 is going to be overwhelming. So let's kind of figure this out. But I'd love to know from your kind of administration perspective, where are you guys in the grant cycle? Like, where are you in the research cycle?
Sure. So we have until December. We've actually been asked to shift gears though, which is not something I've had happen before.
Okay.
So that we've been asked to really move towards hesitancy only, and because the research that they've been doing is really saying that's what you got, and like a chance to move the needle on.
Okay.
And also they really want us to move towards clinics and getting vaccinations.
Holding clinics?
Pardon?
Like holding clinics? What do you mean by clinics?
Like actually vaccinating and whatever it takes to get the vaccinations going, because Delta wasn't a thing. I mean, so what they really thought was going to happen, and I'll send you actually basically a press conference with Ibu Patel that you can put in the show notes.
Yeah.
With all of the research that just came out. But because when they started this grant cycle, the world was very different. I mean, it just was. And so focusing on helping get in anything we can do to help with issues of access. So we will probably move towards the community more as soon as we've done what we can do on campus. Because honestly, on campus, we have so many resources. Students can walk in and pick, any of the 3 vaccines that they want. And so we do believe that there are barriers for students who just really don't know or understand. They're going to be having their first real chance to look at it clearly those first 6 weeks of school.
Okay.
But after that, their opportunities are there and they'll stay there. And so we will make some moves primarily with daycares.
Okay.
As well as an interfaith coalition within the city of Waco. And so we will start working with the Baha'i community, Muslim community, and some progressive and evangelical churches. And that's the next move.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh, that's all really, from our perspective as outsiders who need this kind of data, really exciting.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine overwhelming, overwhelming on the ground. So,
and then the other piece that has been important to me that I wrote into the grant was just the reflective piece. And so, for one, these students have never met, so they've done everything through Zoom all summer. So one of my first priorities is to get them in a room together, and it probably won't happen until September because they deserve to meet.
yes.
So, and throw them like a midway party because they've worked so hard.
Yeah, buy them some barbecue on us for sure. So we'll make that work. Yeah.
So that's going to be, it's hard work and it's depressing at times. It's also been super fun to just get to meet them on Zoom and have them collaborate and work so hard. I mean, so hard, and put in so many hours all across the country.
Wow.
It's been really amazing to watch. So that would be my final word, I think, in terms of what I'd want people to know is that this generation can do anything that they want to. I mean, truly.
Yeah. And we just have to, all the rest of us have to support them or get out of the way in a lot of ways. So, which is the same for every generation. We all need to work together and support each other or get out of each other's way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works. Well, this has been an honor from our perspective, a truly delightful conversation. We really do hope that we can have you back and have more conversations. And Sharyl, for everyone who has not met Sharyl before, it does lots of interfaith work and lots of work with college students. And I know I've been asking her to pick her brain about that in more spaces. So don't be surprised if she shows up more on this channel as I emotionally guilt trip her into doing so. Well, that's it from us. And I think it from the college end, the collegiate end of the conversation. But listen, if you enjoyed this conversation, we would really appreciate it if you did all the YouTube-y things. If you're watching it live here on YouTube, to like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, do it all. If you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure to share it and have conversations. Know that we can get in touch with everybody whose voices you heard. If you've got further conversations, we'd be happy to facilitate that moving forward. So everybody, this has been the Good Doctors Diagnose Live, talking about COVID on college campuses. And we have been honored to share the microphone with 3 wise folks who are on the front lines of that conversation. Thanks, Sharyl, and thanks, Mari, and thanks, Nate, again. And we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.